February 17, 1974, Fort Worth, Texas. A Saturday night like any other. Teenagers spilling out of school dances, parents waiting up with porch lights glowing, the city breathing with the quiet rhythm of ordinary life. But on this night, in a parking lot bathed in fluorescent light, something unforgivable happened. A 17-year-old girl named Carla Walker stepped from the warmth of her boyfriend's car into a nightmare that would consume her family, haunt a city, and remain unsolved for nearly half a century. No gunshots rang out to alert the neighborhood. No witnesses rushed forward. The violence was swift, silent, and absolute. A predator materializing from the shadows, shattering innocence in seconds. By the time anyone realized what had happened, Carla was gone. And for 46 years, her killer walked free, hidden in plain sight, protected by time and the limitations of science. This is the story of Carla Walker, a girl whose laughter once filled high school hallways, whose dreams were stolen in the dark, and whose voice would eventually speak again through the miracle of modern forensics. It's a story of a family's unending grief, a brother's relentless pursuit of truth, and a city that never forgot the girl who vanished on a cold February night. This is a story about how justice, even when it comes too late, can still change everything. Carla Jan Walker wasn't just another name in a police file. She was real, luminous, vibrant, unforgettable. Born on January 31, 1957, she grew up in the gentle sprawl of Fort Worth, where neighborhoods knew each other's names and front doors stayed unlocked. Her childhood home on Ridgelea Drive was filled with the sounds every family knows. Arguments over the bathroom, Saturday morning cartoons, the smell of her mother's cooking drifting through the halls. Her parents, Leighton and Doris Walker, built their world around their children. Leighton worked hard, his hands calloused from years of labor, his heart soft when it came to his daughters. Doris held the family together with quiet strength, her faith unshakable, her love expressed in packed lunches and late-night conversations. Carla was their middle child, sandwiched between her older sister Cindy and her younger brother Jim. Cindy remembered Carla as a little spitfire, full of mischief and energy, the kind of girl who could light up a room just by walking into it. Jim, 12 years old in 1974, idolized his big sister. She was everything he wanted to be: confident, popular, kind. She taught him how to throw a football, how to stand up to bullies, how to believe the world could be good if you approached it with an open heart. At Western Hills High School, Carla was known, not famous, but recognized. A cheerleader whose enthusiasm was genuine, a friend who remembered birthdays and offered encouragement when you needed it most. Teachers liked her. She wasn't a troublemaker, just a girl trying to figure out who she wanted to be. Her grades were decent, her ambitions modest. She didn't dream of Hollywood or New York City. She dreamed of something simpler: a good life, a loving family, a future in the place she'd always called home. And then there was Rodney McCoy, 17, like Carla, with soft eyes and an easy smile. They were that kind of couple, young, hopeful, tangled up in first love. They went to dances together, shared milkshakes at the diner, talked about college and marriage and all the years stretching out before them. Rodney made Carla laugh. She made him feel brave. Together, they were invincible. On weekends, they'd often end up at the Brunswick Ridgely Bowl, a sprawling, neon-lit building where teenagers gathered to bowl, play arcade games, and escape the watchful eyes of parents. It was a safe place, a familiar place, the kind of location that appears in yearbooks and nostalgia, not in nightmares. Carla Walker was 17 years old when she died. She never got to graduate high school, never got to wear a wedding dress, never got to grow old. Her life was a story with the ending torn away, a photograph frozen in time, forever young, forever smiling, forever lost. February 17th, 1974, started like any other Saturday. Carla woke up in her bedroom on Ridgelea Drive, sunlight spilling through the curtains, her cheerleading uniform hanging on the closet door. She had plans, a dance at Western Hills High School that night, and Rodney would pick her up. It was the kind of evening that felt important when you're 17. The music, the friends, the possibility of a kiss under the gym's flickering lights. Her mother watched her get ready, smoothing the wrinkles from Carla's dress, offering advice Carla only half listened to. Jim teased her about Rodney the way younger brothers do. Leighton reminded her to be home by midnight. Ordinary moments, the kind families take for granted until they become memories too painful to touch. Rodney arrived on time, his car idling in the driveway. Carla kissed her mother on the cheek, waved to her father, and disappeared into the night. The dance was everything it was supposed to be. Loud music, laughter, friends huddled in corners sharing secrets. Carla and Rodney danced, their arms around each other, the world shrinking to just the two of them. When the dance ended around 11 p.m., they weren't ready to go home. They drove through Fort Worth's quiet streets, the city settling into its Saturday night rhythm. They ended up at the Brunswick Ridgelea Bowl, parking in the back lot. Carla needed to use the restroom, so they sat in the car for a moment, windows fogging from their breath, the radio playing softly. It was peaceful. It was safe, until it wasn't. Rodney didn't see him coming. One moment, they were talking, and the next, the driver's side door was wrenched open. A man, tall, shadowy, his face obscured, lunged into the car. Rodney barely had time to react before cold metal pressed against his temple. A gun. The man's voice was calm, almost bored, as he gave his commands, but his hands were violent. Rodney tried to fight back, tried to shield Carla, but the man was too strong, too prepared. The gun came down hard against Rodney's skull. Once, twice, again, until the world went black, and Rodney collapsed, unconscious, blood pooling beneath his head. Carla screamed. She fought with everything she had, clawing at the man's arms, kicking, trying to escape. But he dragged her from the car, her cries swallowed by the night. The parking lot remained still. No one heard. No one came. When Rodney woke up, disoriented and bleeding, Carla was gone. He staggered out of the car, calling her name, searching the empty lot. Panic set in. He drove to the Walker house, pounding on the door, barely able to form words. "She's gone," he gasped. Someone took her. Leighton and Doris Walker felt their world collapse in that instant. Police were called. Search parties formed. Hours turned into days. And then, on February 20th, 3 days after Carla disappeared, a fisherman discovered her body in a culvert near Lake Benbrook, about 30 minutes south of Fort Worth. Carla Walker had been beaten, tortured, raped, and strangled. She had fought until the very end, but in the end, she lost. The medical examiner found morphine in her system, evidence of prolonged suffering. Her dress was torn, her body left in the mud like discarded trash. She had been alive for approximately 2 days after the abduction, enduring horrors no one should ever face. The crime scene told a story of cruelty, of a predator who had hunted and claimed his victim with cold precision. But it offered no answers, no witnesses, no clear suspects, just a grieving family and a city gripped by fear. The search for Carla Walker's killer began with urgency. Fort Worth police formed an elite task force, dedicating every available resource to the case. A 24-hour tip line was established. The FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms joined the investigation. Officers canvassed the Brunswick Ridgelea Bowl, interviewing employees, patrons, anyone who might have seen something. The evidence recovered from the scene was limited but crucial. Carla's purse, found near the parking lot, and a magazine, a small metallic piece that had fallen from the attacker's gun during the struggle. It was a .22 Ruger magazine, a specific model that had only recently hit the market. The ATF traced it to approximately 40 men in the Fort Worth area who had purchased that type of firearm in recent months. One by one, detectives interviewed these men. Some had alibis, others submitted to polygraph tests. Among them was Glen Samuel McCurley, a man in his late 20s who lived less than 2 miles from the Walker home. When questioned, McCurley claimed his .22 Ruger had been stolen from his truck weeks earlier. He seemed cooperative, even concerned. And when he passed a polygraph test, detectives moved on. It was a mistake that would haunt the case for decades. Meanwhile, the Walker family was drowning in grief. Leighton and Doris couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't comprehend how their daughter had been taken from them. Jim, only 12 years old, watched his parents age overnight, their faces hollow with loss. Cindy tried to hold the family together, but the weight was unbearable. Rodney McCoy was devastated. He blamed himself, tormented by the memory of Carla's screams, the feeling of helplessness as he lay unconscious. Police questioned him extensively. He was, after all, the last person to see Carla alive. But his grief was genuine, his cooperation complete. He passed multiple polygraph tests. The Walker family never doubted him. The city of Fort Worth was gripped by fear. Parents kept their children close. Rumors spread. Was it a serial killer? A stranger? Someone they knew? The Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo was in town, and some speculated the killer might have been a transient worker, someone passing through. Others whispered about drug dealers, about violence spilling over from the darker corners of the city. But as weeks turned into months, the leads dried up. The task force was disbanded. The case went cold. For the next 46 years, Carla Walker's murder remained unsolved. The evidence, her clothing, the bodily fluid samples collected from the crime scene, sat in a storage locker, carefully preserved but seemingly useless. DNA technology had advanced, but the samples were too degraded, too small to analyze with conventional methods. Jim Walker grew up haunted by his sister's murder. He studied criminal psychology at Sam Houston State University, trying to understand the mind of the person who had destroyed his family. He never stopped asking questions, never stopped hoping for answers. His parents, Leighton and Doris, died without ever knowing who killed their daughter. That pain, that unresolved grief, shaped Jim's entire life. But in 2020, something changed. The case caught the attention of Paul Holes, a renowned cold case investigator who had helped identify the Golden State Killer using forensic genetic genealogy. Holes was working on a documentary series for the Oxygen Network called The DNA of Murder with Paul Holes, which focused on using cutting-edge science to solve decades-old crimes. When he learned about Carla Walker's case, he saw potential. Holes connected Fort Worth police detectives Leah Wagner and Jeff Bennett with Othram Inc., a Texas-based company specializing in the analysis of degraded DNA. Unlike traditional forensic labs, Othram had developed proprietary technology capable of extracting genetic information from samples that were decades old, damaged, or too small for standard testing. The Oxygen Network agreed to fund the analysis, a crucial step, as this kind of advanced testing is expensive and often out of reach for underfunded police departments. Carla's clothing was sent to Othram's lab. Scientists located a tiny, barely visible stain on her bra strap, evidence that had been sitting in storage for 46 years. Using forensic-grade genome sequencing, Othram was able to generate a DNA profile from the degraded sample. Then, using forensic genetic genealogy, they uploaded the profile to genealogical databases and began building family trees, searching for relatives of the person who had left that DNA on Carla's body. The process took months. Genealogists worked meticulously, tracing lineages, eliminating branches, narrowing the search. And finally, they found a match. The DNA pointed to the McCurley family. And within that family, one name stood out. Glen Samuel McCurley, the same man who had been questioned and cleared in 1974. In September 2020, Fort Worth detectives began surveilling Glen McCurley's home. He was 77 years old now, living in a small tan-colored house in far west Fort Worth, less than 2 miles from where Carla had grown up. For decades, he had lived an unremarkable life, blending into the fabric of the city, his secret buried. Detectives obtained DNA samples from McCurley's trash, discarded coffee cups, cigarette butts, items that carried his genetic signature. The samples were analyzed and compared to the DNA from Carla's bra strap. The match was conclusive on September 22, 2020, 46 years, 7 months, and 5 days after Carla Walker was murdered. Glen Samuel McCurley was arrested. The U.S. Marshals Delta team executed the arrest warrant, taking McCurley into custody without incident. He looked old, frail, nothing like the violent predator who had terrorized Fort Worth in 1974. But the evidence was irrefutable. During interrogation, McCurley initially denied involvement, but as detectives laid out the DNA evidence, the genealogical analysis, the decades of investigation, his resolve crumbled. He confessed, though his words were vague and evasive. "I did do it, I guess," he said, tears streaming down his face. He admitted to being drunk that night, to looking for a victim. He offered no real explanation, no meaningful apology, just a hollow acknowledgement of guilt. For the Walker family, the arrest was overwhelming. Jim Walker, now 58 years old, had spent his entire adult life waiting for this moment. "The word that came across my brain was finally," he later said. "This is a resolution that's been prayed for." But the relief was tangled with rage and sorrow. His parents were gone. Carla was still gone. Justice had come, but it felt incomplete. The trial began in August 2021. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence: the DNA analysis, the genealogical research, the .22 Ruger pistol found in McCurley's home, the same gun he had claimed was stolen 47 years earlier. Othram scientists testified about their methods, explaining how they had coaxed a genetic profile from a decades-old stain. Forensic experts walked the jury through the crime scene, the autopsy findings, the physical evidence. Rodney McCoy, now in his 60s, took the stand. His voice shook as he recounted that night in the parking lot, the sudden violence, the sound of Carla's screams, the guilt he had carried ever since. Jim Walker testified about his sister, about the family's loss, about the 46 years they had spent searching for answers. The courtroom was silent, heavy with emotion. Spectators wept. Journalists scribbled notes. And Glen McCurley sat motionless, his face a mask. Then, on the third day of the trial, something unexpected happened. McCurley's defense attorney stood and announced that his client wished to change his plea. McCurley pleaded guilty to the murder of Carla Walker. There would be no jury deliberation, no verdict to await. Just a simple, devastating acknowledgement. He had done it. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice for Carla Walker came 47 years too late. It couldn't undo the violence, couldn't bring her back, couldn't heal the wounds left in her family. But it was something, a name, an answer, an ending to a story that had haunted generations. Glen Samuel McCurley was transferred to the Gibb Lewis Unit, a maximum security prison in Texas. He would never walk free again. On July 15, 2023, he died in custody, taking with him whatever secrets he still held. Investigators suspected he may have been responsible for other unsolved murders in the Fort Worth area during the 1970s and 1980s. Young women found strangled, their cases eerily similar to Carla's. But McCurley was never charged with those crimes, and with his death, the truth was buried. For Jim Walker, the verdict was bittersweet. He had spent his entire life fighting for his sister, and now, finally, she had justice. But his parents hadn't lived to see it. Leighton and Doris Walker died without answers, their hearts broken, their faith tested. Jim often thought about them, about how they would have reacted to the arrest, the trial, the guilty plea. He imagined his mother crying, his father standing a little taller. He wished they could have been there. Cindy Stone, Carla's older sister, felt a similar mix of relief and sadness. "We've lived with this for so long," she said in an interview. "It becomes part of who you are. And now it's over, but it's not really over. We still miss her. We always will." Fort Worth, too, was changed. The city held vigils in Carla's memory, her name spoken with reverence and sorrow. Western Hills High School established a scholarship in her honor, ensuring that her legacy would live on in the students who followed. The Brunswick Ridgelea Bowl, once a place of fear and tragedy, became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the darkest stories can find light. And then there was the legislation. Jim Walker channeled his grief into advocacy, working with lawmakers to ensure that other families wouldn't have to wait 46 years for answers. In December 2024, U.S. Senators John Cornyn and Peter Welch introduced the Carla Walker Act, bipartisan legislation that would provide federal funding for forensic genetic genealogy programs. The bill allocated $5 million annually for state and local law enforcement agencies to access advanced DNA testing technology. The Carla Walker Act passed in 2025. It was signed into law, a tribute to a girl who had been stolen too soon, and a promise to the countless families still waiting for justice. Jim Walker stood on the steps of the Capitol, his sister's photograph in his hands, and spoke to the gathered crowd. "There are so many Carla Walker families out there," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Families quietly crying for justice, for resolution, for some answers. This law is for them." Carla Walker's story didn't end with her murder. It lived on in the people who loved her, in the detectives who never gave up, in the scientists who found her voice in a decades-old stain. It lived on in the laws that bear her name, in the cold cases solved because of her, in the families who find hope in her story. She was 17 when she died, forever young, forever remembered. And though justice came too late to save her, it came nonetheless, carried forward by love, science, and the unshakable belief that some truths cannot stay buried forever. In the end, Carla Walker's legacy isn't just about what was taken. It's about what remains, the love of a brother who refused to let her be forgotten, the courage of a family who endured the unendurable, and the promise that even after 46 years, justice can still find its way home.